stop, don't scroll past this. Because what you're about to hear is not just disturbing, it's deeply unsettling. A young man drove over 60 miles to visit someone he trusted with his life, his best friend. By sunrise, he was gone. And what police would uncover hours later would leave an entire town in shock. Before we go any further, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from right now? And what time is it over there as you're listening? Drop it in the comments. And if you're drawn to real, dark true crime stories that stay with you long after the video ends, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, because this case only gets darker from here. This is 21-year-old Brandon Reisner, and standing beside him are his parents. At first glance, it looks like a normal moment, a family sitting together. But nothing about this moment is normal, because just hours before this, Brandon wasn't sitting calmly beside his parents. He was running from the police after allegedly doing something unthinkable. And as his parents slowly begin to realize what their son may have done, you can almost feel it, the quiet, suffocating tension in the room, the kind of silence that says everything is about to change. It all began on a cold morning in November 2022, in the quiet town of Rome, Georgia. The kind of place where nothing ever really happens. Police received a strange call. A car had been spotted in a creek. Not near the water, not accidentally off the road, but inside the creek, submerged. As if someone had driven it there on purpose. When officers arrived, they didn't rush in. They stood there for a moment, just looking, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The car sat at an unnatural angle, partially swallowed by the water. Silent, still, out of place. A tow truck was called in, and slowly the vehicle was pulled from the creek. Water dripping, metal creaking, revealing more with every inch it rose. At that moment, it still looked like an accident. Maybe someone lost control, maybe it was just bad luck. But then they ran the license plate and everything changed. The car belonged to 21-year-old Aaron Davis. And in a small town like this, names matter. People know each other. Families are known. Within minutes, officers contacted Aaron's father. At first it was routine, just a simple question. Have you heard from your son? But the answer changed everything. No, he hadn't. Not that morning. Not the night before. Not at all. And when he tried calling him, it went straight to voicemail. That's when concern turned into fear. Because the night before, Aaron had made a decision, a simple one. One that should have been harmless. He drove over 60 miles to visit his best friend, Brandon Reisner. They had known each other for years, middle school. Shared memories, inside jokes, trust. The kind of friendship where you don't think twice before showing up at someone's door. Aaron had just graduated. His future was just beginning. This visit was supposed to be a celebration, a moment between friends. But instead, it became something else entirely. From the moment Aaron arrived at Brandon's house, he was never seen again. No calls, no messages, no activity, just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't feel normal, the kind that feels wrong. Police quickly opened a missing persons case. And like in every investigation, they started with the last known contact, Brandon Reisner. On the phone, Brandon sounded calm, too calm, controlled, measured. He told officers that the two of them had been drinking that night. At some point, Aaron started feeling sick, vomiting heavily. According to Brandon, Aaron asked to be left alone. So Brandon went to bed, and when he woke up in the early morning, Aaron and his car were gone. At first, it sounded plausible. People drink, people get sick, people leave unexpectedly. It happens. But something about it didn't sit right, not with experienced officers, not with instinct. So they made a decision. They wouldn't rely on a phone call. They needed to see Brandon face to face. Just hours later, they showed up at his house unannounced. When Brandon opened the door, he didn't look nervous. He didn't look scared. If anything, he looked normal, calm, cooperative, almost like he had nothing to hide. They asked him to explain everything again. And he did. Same story, same details, no hesitation. But here's the thing about lies. The more perfect they sound, the more dangerous they are. Then officers asked a simple question. Can we come inside? And Brandon said yes. That decision changed everything. The moment officers stepped inside, something felt off. Not obvious, not immediate, but subtle, the kind of feeling you can't explain but you don't ignore. Then they noticed the doors. Some of them were locked unnecessarily, including the room where Aaron had supposedly been sick. That alone raised suspicion. But when they opened that door, everything shifted. The smell hit first strong. Chemical cleaning products. Too many cleaning products. And not in a normal way. It felt recent, fresh, like something had just been wiped away. Then they saw it, blood. Not a small stain, not something accidental, but a large amount spread across the room. Near the bed, soaked into surfaces. This wasn't someone getting sick. This was violence, clear, unmistakable. And in that moment, the entire case changed. This was no longer a missing person investigation. This was something much darker. And somehow Brandon knew it, because without warning, he ran. He bolted out the door over a fence, gone before officers could react. Police immediately locked down the area. Officers spread out knocking on doors, talking to neighbors, searching, but Brandon had vanished. Then something unexpected happened. One officer approached a neighbor who was on the phone with Brandon's father. The officer took the phone. On the other end was a man who had no idea what was unfolding. Jeremy Reisner, confused, unaware, thought his son was still home. He didn't know Brandon had just run from the police. And in that moment, everything began to unravel. Time passed. Tension built. And then Jeremy returned home. Inside the house, he found something, Brandon's phone. At first, Jeremy had been cooperative, helpful, willing to assist police. But after finding that phone, something changed completely. He stopped cooperating, refused to hand it over. And investigators immediately noticed. Because people don't change like that without a reason. When they spoke to him again, he seemed different, quieter, heavier, like someone carrying something invisible, something disturbing, something he couldn't process. Because on that phone were notes. Not normal notes. Disturbing ones, dark thoughts, fragments of something deeper. And then, the most chilling discovery of all, a list. A step-by-step list what to do after the crime. Cleaning, laundry, showering, what to say, how to act, how to explain Aaron's disappearance. It wasn't panic. It wasn't confusion. It was planning. And at that moment, the truth became impossible to ignore. Not long after Jeremy made the call, he told police he was with Brandon and his son was ready to surrender. About 25 minutes later, Brandon walked into the station, sat beside his parents, still, quiet, emotionless. Detectives read Brandon Reisner his rights, and still he didn't speak. Not a word. Silence hung in the room like a living thing, thick and suffocating. His parents, sitting beside him, faces pale, eyes wide with fear and disbelief, tried to reach him, their voices trembling as they asked questions. Pleaded for answers, but Brandon remained unmoved, calm, cold, emotionless, a mask of composure that made the room feel even darker. Then came the critical detail. His father, Jeremy, trembling but resolute, shared the location, an old cemetery, hidden away on the outskirts of town, a place where secrets could linger forever without being discovered. Police officers immediately mobilized. Flashlights cut through the early morning darkness, shovels in hand, hearts racing with dread. Every step toward that cemetery was heavy with anticipation, the kind that makes your stomach turn as if you already know the truth but fear confirming it. Officers moved carefully, scanning every inch, calling out, listening for anything out of place. And then beneath the cold, unyielding soil, they found Aaron Davis wrapped in sheets from Brandon's house. Buried, hidden, a life stolen in the most horrifying way imaginable. A young man full of promise, taken in a single night by someone he trusted more than anyone else. The arrest was immediate. Brandon remained calm, emotionless, almost eerily so. As he was handcuffed and led away, outside the air felt heavier, almost suffocating, carrying the weight of a family's grief and a town's shock. News spread quickly, and every new detail made the horror even more impossible to comprehend. How could someone so familiar, so seemingly normal, commit such an act? There were no warning signs, No sudden change in behavior that anyone could point to. It was a normal night, a visit between best friends. A life that should have continued, and then darkness. The kind that leaves an echo, a mark that doesn't fade. The kind that makes you question trust, safety, and everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you. Even in custody, Brandon's calm was unsettling. He didn't cry, he didn't plead, he didn't try to explain. The silence in the interrogation room was louder than any scream, louder than any confession could ever be. It was a silence that carried guilt, planning, and a terrifying clarity of mind. A silence that made detectives and his parents alike realize some darkness can't be reasoned with. Some evil doesn't stumble, it walks deliberately. As the first rays of sunlight touched the cemetery, a family's world had been irreversibly shattered. And somewhere, in quiet moments, the thought lingered like smoke sometimes. The people you trust most, the ones who know your fears, your secrets, your hopes, are capable of the most unimaginable betrayals. The cemetery was quiet, almost painfully so. The kind of silence that presses down on you, makes your skin crawl. Police officers moved carefully between gravestones, flashlights cutting through the mist, each step feeling heavier than the last. The earth, cold and unyielding, seemed almost alive beneath their shovels. Every motion, every sound carried the weight of anticipation and dread. Jeremy Reisner watched from the edge, his heart pounding so loudly it felt like it might burst from his chest. He had known fear before, but nothing like this. He had called the police, he had handed over Brandon, he had cooperated, but now standing here, facing the possibility of what his son had done, he felt frozen, trapped in a nightmare that refused to end. Then the ground shifted. A faint scrape of metal on earth. Officers exchanged tense glances and dug faster, each movement deliberate, careful, as if disturbing the soil too harshly could erase the truth they were desperate to uncover. And then a sheet. White, soaked, heavy. They pulled at it, the fabric clinging to the form beneath. Aaron Davis, lifeless, the young man who had driven over 60 miles the night before to see his best friend, whose life should have been full of plans, dreams, laughter, and freedom, was now gone, stolen from the world in a single night by someone he had trusted completely. The air seemed to tremble with the weight of realization. Brandon's calm, collected exterior earlier now made sense, terrifying in its clarity. Every lie, every detail, every step in that night's plan had been executed with precision. There was no panic, no hesitation, just cold calculation. Officers looked at each other, knowing instinctively that the horror of what they had uncovered was only part of the story. Back at the station, Brandon sat silently, hands cuffed, eyes vacant. Detectives attempted to speak, to provoke a response, but he offered none. His silence was louder than any confession. Statement of control, a statement of terrifying detachment. His parents, broken and desperate, clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, their son's mind could be reached. But with each passing second, that hope shrank, replaced by the chilling truth. The person they knew, the son they had loved, had orchestrated something monstrous. The town began to stir with the news. Shock rippled through families, neighbors, and friends. Everyone asked the same question. How could this happen? How could someone so familiar, so close, commit something so unthinkable? And yet the answer lay not in sudden impulses or accidents, it lay in quiet planning, in darkness that had festered unnoticed, in trust betrayed in the most absolute way. The aftermath of discovery was suffocating. The officers carried Aaron's lifeless body carefully, the weight of it far heavier than mere flesh and bone. Every step seemed like an eternity, each movement echoing the finality of what had happened. The cemetery, once peaceful and forgotten, now held a dark memory that would never fade, a grave not of time, but of betrayal. Back at the station, Brandon Reisner remained motionless, almost impossibly calm. Detectives circled him, questioning, probing. But his silence was an impenetrable wall. Every unanswered question amplified the horror. His composure was unnerving, a chilling reminder that some darkness exists not in sudden outbursts, but in calculated patient planning. Jeremy and his wife sat nearby, faces pale, hands trembling. They spoke of Brandon's childhood, of the boy they had raised, full of dreams and laughter. They recalled moments that now felt distant, like fragments of another life. How had it come to this? How had the son they knew, the friend they trusted, become someone capable of such horror? Every memory collided with the reality in front of them, creating a storm of disbelief and grief too vast to contain. Officers compiled evidence with methodical precision, documenting every shred of detail, every note, every trace that could explain what had transpired. Brandon had left nothing to chance. Every lie, every story he told, every alibi meticulously crafted, had been intended to manipulate. The night air outside the station was thick with unease. Inside, the detectives worked tirelessly, piecing together Brandon's movements, every step from the moment Aaron arrived to the final, chilling act that left a young life buried in the cemetery. Each detail, each note found on Brandon's phone, painted a picture of someone who had planned meticulously, executed without hesitation, and remained unnervingly calm through it all. Brandon sat still as stone, while his parents tried to comprehend the reality in front of them. Their son, the boy who had shared their meals, their laughter, their hopes, was gone. In his place was a chilling void, a calculating mind capable of cold, deliberate violence. His father's voice cracked as he recounted memories of Brandon's struggles, the anxiety, the dark thoughts, the subtle changes no one had taken seriously. Each recollection collided with the horrific truth, making the realization unbearable. The signs had been invisible until it was too late. Outside, the town's shock was palpable. Word of Aaron's death and Brandon's arrest traveled fast, leaving neighbors whispering in disbelief. The sense of safety, of normalcy, had evaporated overnight. Families looked at their own children. Friends questioned long-standing trust, and every quiet street seemed suddenly sinister. This was a betrayal not just of a single life, but of the community's faith in one another. A stark reminder that evil can hide behind the most familiar faces. Back at the station, investigators focused on the evidence. Brandon's phone, the notes, the step-by-step plan. It all revealed a mind operating with frightening clarity. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't chaos. This was deliberate, organized, and terrifying in its precision. Every lie he told, every detail fabricated, was meant to mislead, to control the narrative, to manipulate the people around him. Yet, despite the meticulous planning, human intuition and careful police work had caught the smallest discrepancies, unraveling the truth piece by piece. As hours stretched into the early morning, the enormity of the crime weighed heavily on everyone involved. Officers and detectives alike were haunted by the stark realization that Brandon's calm demeanor, the very thing that unnerved them, had been a deliberate tool, a calculated mask that allowed him to commit an act that would devastate not just Aaron's family, but his own, forever altering the lives of everyone connected to them. Even in the silence of the station, the weight of the crime lingered. Every officer, every parent, every person hearing the story felt the chill of betrayal, the incomprehensible reality that someone so close, someone trusted without question, had taken a life and hidden it in plain sight. The darkness wasn't over. It had only begun to seep into the town, into families, into minds that would never forget. By the time morning fully broke over Rome, Georgia, the weight of the night's events had settled like a storm over the town. Brandon Reisner remained in custody, still calm, still silent, as if the world outside no longer mattered. But inside the minds of those who had been touched by his actions, the families, the officers, the community, the storm raged on, relentless, impossible to ignore. Aaron Davis. Family struggled with a grief so profound it seemed to defy understanding. A young life full of potential stolen in a single night. A life taken by someone he trusted more than anyone else. Friends and neighbors, too, grappled with disbelief. The very idea that darkness could lurk behind a familiar face, behind a smile, behind a friendship built over years, was almost too much to bear. At the station, detectives reviewed every piece of evidence again and again, The notes on Brandon's phone, the lists of instructions, the meticulous planning, it all revealed a mind operating with terrifying clarity. Nothing had been left to chance. Every step, every story, every detail was designed to manipulate, to deceive, to control the perception of everyone around him. And yet, despite the precision, human intuition had exposed the cracks. Those small inconsistencies, almost invisible, had led to the truth, a truth so chilling it seemed impossible. Brandon's parents sat nearby, trying to reconcile the son they knew with the monster revealed. Memories of laughter, of shared moments, the dreams for the future, now collided violently with the horror of the present. Their questions went unanswered, their pleas unheard. Silence had become a weapon, a wall of cold detachment that no love could penetrate. Outside the town began the slow, painful process of reckoning. Conversations were hushed, trust was fragile, and a quiet paranoia settled into daily life. Everyone wondered, how could we have missed the signs? How could someone so close, someone so trusted, commit something so unfathomable? And as they asked themselves these questions, the chilling realization remained. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones you invite into your life, the ones you trust without hesitation, the ones you never suspect. As investigators closed the case, the weight of what had happened didn't lift, it lingered. The story of Aaron Davis and Brandon Reisner became a cautionary tale, a dark reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself. It moves quietly, deliberately, often hidden behind familiarity. And for a family, for a town, for a community, that night would never truly end. The echoes of betrayal, of violence, of calculated darkness would resonate forever. Sometimes the most horrifying stories aren't about strangers, but about the ones we call friends, the ones we love, the ones we trust. And sometimes by the time you realize the truth, it's already too late.